Now, Tennessee did lose Chase Burns, but they turned right back around, and Tony Vitello got himself one of the top transfers in America from NC State, which has weirdly become like an elite feeder school now. Tommy White last year coming in out of NC State, and now Cannon Peebles. Love this name. Love this pickup. I think I saw, what did he bat? 352 last year, something like that. Dude was a monster at the plate. He was great as a catcher. And you look at what Tennessee had behind the plate this season, and Cal Stark, not bad as a catcher. He was okay. I would say middle of the road, but he was rough as a batter. He was basically just, I mean, it was almost an automatic out a lot of the time. He had his moments. He had his moments where, he made some plays, but just largely replacing that with a guy batting 352 is big. What'd you think when you saw this, Zach?
I mean, my first thought was, you already mentioned it, Tommy White, going from NC State to LSU and the huge impact he had on them winning the College World Series. You kind of get a player that's similar in a lot of ways. This guy's, can kill the ball. He hit 12 home runs last year, OPS over 1,100, I think. Spent most of his time at DH. Actually, I think he had 30 starts at DH, 9 at catcher. So, there's some options there for Tony Vitello to work with and how he wants to use him and insert him into the lineup. But yeah, huge pickup. Clearly, Tennessee needs a little more offense. There was times the offense was just too streaky last season that really cost them in some games. I'm not going to say too much about that LSU game, going against Skeens in that one matchup. That's, good luck with that. That's not so much on the offense. It's just he's a great pitcher, but they definitely need to add some more consistent bats, and feels like this is going to help eliminate a hole that was in the lineup, like you mentioned.
Absolutely. I think it is really big and takes some of the sting off of the Chase Burns situation, because the fact is, with Tony Vitello, you can lose a guy like Chase Burns, but Tony Vitello at this point, I mean, he's one of the elite recruiters in all of America in college baseball. Period. He is doing it near the top of the game, and so that is something that can at least keep you sleeping all right at night. even with Chase Burns leaving, is knowing that Tony is still going out there getting these dudes. Now, there's going to be plenty of other guys to choose from, and I think there's more bolstering that you can do. Some guys are leaving. You got to hope that some of these young guys step up, but I think there's more holes that can be filled, and hopefully Tony does that. I'm not going to say that I know everybody that's in the transfer portal in baseball right now, but I'm sure he's looking around, taking a good hard look, and I'm sure he'll find his guys.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's so much movement this time of year with play. I mean, you saw, Wake Forest almost made it to the final, and they've already lost a couple of their key players to the transfer portal. It's just to me the way of the sport, between the culture that we talked about, NIL deals, transfer portal. It's just all combined to make this perfect storm, and it might end up being worse in baseball than even football, because it seems like the football guys, I mean, if you're a great player at some of these schools, a Power 5 program, a lot of times they stick where they're at. They continue on. They know they're going to the NFL. That's their goal. If they're at a place that can possibly compete for a championship or an impressive bowl game, they kind of stick around. But in baseball, you're already seeing it doesn't matter where you're at. Star, not a star, nobody's really like safe. I mean, there could be anybody from Tennessee enter the portal, and it would not be a complete shock. I mean, Chase Burns from the middle part of the state, and that didn't really seem to play a factor in him wanting to stay around.
Yeah, it has really become, in football, if you play one of those group of 5 schools, you're in a feeder league essentially. you're trying to make your name and move up from the G League to the pros in Power 5.
And the
In
other guys that
baseball,
do it in Power 5, just to add to that, it's like the reserves, the guys that aren't getting the playing time they thought they were going to get, that leave to seek that out.
Yep. And I mean, in baseball, yeah, it almost, maybe it is just perception because this has happened to Tennessee just now, but like, yeah, it does seem like more guys from major programs. Maui Ahuna from Kansas. It's not like Kansas is some tiny athletic department. I mean, it's the biggest school in that state, and and you're sniping some of their best guys. So
Well, NC
it's
State, losing
yeah,
Tommy White last year, and of course that's something that's been happening at NC State for a long time. Russell Wilson left there to go to Wisconsin years ago because they wouldn't let him play baseball at NC State. But
unfortunate for NC State. My in-laws are NC State folks, and they're I think it is interesting. They're kind of would agnostic be the right word? I think because NC State is really viewed as just like, oh, it's kind of a stepping stool school athletically. They're not like huge NC State sports people, but
that's a weird
just an
program.
observation.
They're kind of nestled in there between UNC and Duke. It seems like everybody kind of forgets about them. They're just like the third school in North Carolina.
Great engineering school, though.
Yeah.
I guess that's really their deal.
Yeah.
But regardless, there's that on the recruiting front for baseball. Excellent pickup, really huge pickup there that I think is going to help Tennessee a lot. But then you turn right around and you look at football. And this weekend for Tennessee football was another just gargantuan weekend where they had a ton of guys in and they just rolled out every red carpet possible. And it's more now. I say all this stuff not knowing. I don't cover recruiting every single day. That is not my job. I'm not your Austin Price out here, so I don't know what Georgia is doing day to day. I don't know what Alabama is doing day to day in recruiting and on these big weekends. But Tennessee is doing stuff that I've never seen Tennessee really do on the recruiting trail. And they're taking like new media and social media and all of that, and they're using that to boost recruiting very purposefully. I think it seems like very purposefully getting these recruits to post on social media, to put it out there that, oh, look, we're going to Tennessee and cool stuff is happening. Look at this. And so this weekend, I mean, the ones that you saw, they did like this like 1990s Bulls entrance for all of these guys where they walked through the door into the locker room and it was literally like, 6'4" from the state of Georgia, whatever it may be. And they announce these guys coming in, they take their picture, they do the whole thing. Their parents are there hyping them up. And then they literally had like a dance party in the locker room at Neyland. It's wild. I love it. And hopefully it turns into commits. It hasn't yet. Yeah, 2 commits last week. Really nice commits. So far, you haven't gotten any, but it seems like there's a couple of big ones that are coming up, Zach. But what did you see from this weekend of recruiting?
I mean, it seems like I read a lot of the interviews with the recruits that were there this past weekend, and it feels like Tennessee's kind of becoming the fun school, and not in a bad way, because you could say, oh, the fun school, they're just kind of maybe back to the Butch Jones era, trying to, put on this big production and not make football the main thing. But football's still the main thing at Tennessee. This is just Josh Heupel and his staff really knowing how to recruit, how to make players have fun. And it's not so much that it's this great, just fun atmosphere, environment, activities. It's the vibe of how people feel when they leave Tennessee. They leave feeling good. They leave, I enjoyed myself. I had a good time. It doesn't mean all those guys are going to commit to Tennessee, but they leave with a positive impression of Tennessee. And you never know when that comes up in conversations with other recruits or just how that can help Tennessee down the road, just the reputation that they're gaining on the trail. If anything, at worst, it gets some players on campus that maybe you wouldn't have got on campus otherwise. And maybe one of those turns into a commit. Maybe a 5-star has an official visit to Burn and they say, hey, let's go to Tennessee and check it out. And they get there and it gives them something to think about. And yeah, it's going to be tough to land some of those guys, of course, but it's another, feather in Josh Heupel's cap for pushing all the right buttons. The guy seemingly has done everything right since he's arrived at Tennessee, and it doesn't feel like it's a stretch to say that. It doesn't feel like we're trying to build him up. In fact, at times I feel like we try to rein it in a little bit because we've put so much praise on him, but he hasn't really, he deserves it. He hasn't done anything to kind of alter your view of that outside of that South Carolina game, which, a lot of people can share the blame for that game. He hasn't really had a huge misstep while at Tennessee. And I felt even that he handled it extremely well. They bounced back against Vanderbilt. He handled it all with the media extremely well. He couldn't have went any better or had a better answer for that loss. But between that and the way they're recruiting right now and the just the visits that they're putting on, the way these kids are talking about Tennessee. They're I hate to say it, it's like that whole sleeping monster thing. I mean, Tennessee is kind of that sleeping giant that's waiting to take over college football. I mean, they're right there on the cusp of that. They got to continue to take those steps to get there and to get over the hump, but they're right up against it right now.
Yeah, it does have to end with landing these elite guys, but they're doing the things that it's going to take to land these elite guys, because we've said it week in and week out. It's 100% clear that Tennessee can compete on the recruiting trail in every single way possible in terms of resources, money, the things that they can do for these recruits. I mean, Knoxville is one of the biggest cities in the SEC. Just the show that they can put on and what they could give to these recruits in terms of, like, the NCAA doesn't want to talk about it, but money and things like that. I mean, Tennessee's right there. Nobody's going to beat them if Tennessee puts their mind to that. But what Tennessee cannot say at this point is a national championship in the last 20, however many years it's been, 25.
25, yeah.
Yeah, too long. And you can't say no SEC championship in the last 25 years. Like, you can't. That's where the rubber has to meet the road, and where you're probably not going to consistently land these elite guys until you do that. And unfortunately, your primary rival on the recruiting trail just happens to reside 3.5 hours down I-75 South in Georgia. And so they're right there on your doorstep, recruiting all the elite guys in their state, just sucking up all those resources and elite prospects. And so somehow you have to overcome that. And that is just, you have to beat them. And so I love this. They are, but the point of this conversation is just that they're doing absolutely everything. Not that I would criticize them if none of this was out in the open, because largely with recruiting stuff, it's kind of behind closed doors a lot of the times. It's just a lot of stuff you don't see. And I think there's still a ton of stuff Tennessee is doing that you don't see. But I love that they're putting it out publicly, going like, Tennessee is where you're going to get everything that you want as a prospect. And not only that, but you're going to be treated excellently here, but you're also going to win. And it's that winning piece that goes, okay, you have the 11 wins in a season under your belt. Let's go win some championships. That's where the men are going to be separated from the boys, so to speak, as if Tennessee can finally make that happen. And I think Josh Heupel's the dude that's doing it right now. And one of the guys from this weekend that it seems like they made a real impression on was this wide receiver, Mike Matthews, 5-star wide receiver. We've talked about him already. There's been really good signs for Tennessee with him. I don't know, where does he stand on like the on-3 rating meter, which is, not exactly super reliable, but wow. So he's up to 78% to Tennessee on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine. But this would be a great place to start. Get this kid who is from Lilburn, Georgia, out of the state of Georgia, right out from under Georgia's nose. This would be an incredible pickup, and he was there this weekend, and it seems like they made a really great impression.
Yeah, he talked to several media outlets about his visit. Definitely enjoyed it. I mean, it's just the same tone like we were talking about in the previous conversation about the tone coming from recruits and how much they're enjoying Tennessee, the vibe, how good they feel after they leave there. He mentioned they went out on the water. He was with Nico and Boo Carter, recent Tennessee commit, who's very energetic on the recruiting trail for the Vols. I mean, I felt like that was definitely by design. I mean, because if Mike Matthews comes to Tennessee, Nico will likely be his quarterback, will be expected to be the guy throwing the ball to him. And he's the number one player in the 2023 class. Why would you not want a 5-star wide receiver hanging out with him during an official visit? So I thought that was smart by Tennessee. Seems like they're doing everything right with Matthews. Josh Newberg from On3, who has spent some time with Mike Matthews, doubled down. If you remember back in May, I think he was one of the first ones to predict Matthews to Tennessee, or might have been early June. After this most recent official visit, Josh Newberg went out this week and, like I said, doubled down on Matthews to Tennessee. He said he thinks Tennessee can land them, thinks they're trending for him pretty heavily. He thinks they can get Amari Jefferson too, 4-star wide receiver that Alabama. They're kind of in a fight with Alabama for. The kid wants to play both sports, baseball and football, at the next level or in college. I mean, you lay in both of those guys and Josh Heupel and Nico. I mean, they're going to have an elite wide receiver group. They've already had great wide receivers, right? I mean, you've had Jalen Hyatt, 4-star coming out of high school. You've had Brew McCoy, a former 5-star who didn't really pan out at USC, and Ramel Keaton, a 4-star, and Squirrel White, who has elite speed. But you haven't really had those premier top 10 in the nation type players in this offense yet. As good as the offense was without that, can you imagine what it would be with a Nico, with a Mike Matthews, with an Amari Jefferson in this offense? I mean, that is national championship caliber stuff. So this is definitely Matthews, definitely a player Tennessee wants to get. I mean, they're going hard after him. It's going to be a disappointment if they don't get him. If he ends up somewhere else, it's going to be a crushing loss in recruiting. I mean, Tennessee will be okay because they can develop receivers and they can get the most out of them. But you want to have that elite guy. I mean, you want to see what that elite guy can do in this offense. So it's a very important battle they're in here.
Yeah, they gotta shut the door on those and make sure that those guys are in the boat by the end here, because Tennessee, just looking at the overall landscape, I mean, Georgia has 21 commits, Ohio State 16, Florida 17, USC 15, and Michigan at 23, and Tennessee is still at 14. So they're still hanging back with a relatively low number of players in this class so far. So you got a lot of closing to do.
Yeah, I think there's guys they could probably get right now that they could probably take commitments from, but they're kind of waiting because they got guys higher up the board. And that's a good sign. I mean, that's where in previous years, Tennessee might have 22 commits right now because they're not in it for those other guys and they know they're not in it. So, yeah, you still got to close the deal. You don't want to come up short. I mean, inevitably, you're going to miss on some of these, of course. But for the most part, you need to close the deal, sign them, get them to Knoxville. And then Tennessee can really take off under Josh Heupel.
Well, we'll just have to see what happens. So hopefully some of those guys start rolling in. We can talk about that next week or in the next few weeks about Tennessee getting some of those 5 stars. That would be amazing. Hopefully it happens.